let's just assume that Joseph Smith made a mistake. Why do we have such a hard time? Is it because people's testimonies are like fragile about Joseph Smith that they still can't recognize that maybe he made a mistake, but still believe that he was a prophet? Let's use our brains for a second. And an angel comes to him with a drawn sword and commands him to begin practicing polygamy, or else he would kill him. What do we know about God and agency? He never takes agency away. And to say that, oh, they're just being persecuted, maybe the Lord is chastising them. Welcome in to another episode of Radical Restoration here on Zion Media. And it's been a minute since we've recorded an episode. We've decided to really dig deep. We are going to go through, and this is something that MacGyver and I have done over the course of the last year or so as we've started talking. It's Sunday morning here in Utah, a little bit of snow on the ground already. And we're just going to kind of discuss, not necessarily make any statements of fact. We're just going to discuss a variety of things that involve the early restoration of the church. We're going to get into Fanny Alger. We're going to get into Joseph Smith's relationship with her. We're going to talk about how Emma Smith maybe felt about that relationship. We're going to ask ChatGPT, what does ChatGPT think? And Greg MacGyver here has done some research on this. We're also going to talk about 9 boxes that have, I don't know if it's recently been found, but are somewhere here at the University of Utah that give us more insights into Oliver Cowdery's life. And, it's my opinion that Oliver Cowdery is one of those great unsung heroes of the Restoration and played a pivotal role in the Restoration. MacGyver, welcome in to another episode. Let's just have a conversation here and talk a little bit about thoughts and what was going on. And maybe let's discuss a little back history as to where does she even come from? How old is she? I know there's been rumors that she was 14 years old or something like that, but let's just get into the backstory. So talk to me, Goose. What are you thinking about all this?
Well, good morning from Texas. It's a little later than it is there for you. Nice, bright and early for you. Well, Fanny Alger was a housekeeper for a couple of years, just helping out in the house. And young girl, it was not correct that she was 14. I've seen 17 or 18 or 18 to 19. So she was not a very young teenager at all. She was a grown woman, very young woman. She would qualify to attend Young Women's and actually the Relief Society at that day. So they had a lot going on. I'm sure the background on where she was born, I think she was born in New York, and I didn't study her back history that much, but there's this book, Oliver Cowdery, The Elusive Second Elder of the Restoration. I'm an older one. Oliver Cowdery, Second Elder and Scribe, that one. This one is Oliver's writings about the prophet and the plates, the letters 1 through 8. And then this one's really good, Oliver Cowdery, Scribe, Elder, Witness. It's a compilation of a bunch of articles, and then looking at websites, listening to podcasts. And there's a recent one actually by Dr. Christopher Smith, Chris Smith, on LDS Tangents, or and he's got his doctorate, and he's a professional historian. He's not a member of the church, and he stated that this possibly could have been a spiritual feeling and not necessarily an affair, but just coming from the perspective of Oliver, he he was in Far West, and then he took a trip to Kirtland. And this is after, during the Kirtland banking, or the anti-banking bank, the Kirtland Safety Society anti-banking bank, that was blowing up. And it wasn't just the Kirtland Society bank. It was the whole nation was having a recession and a banking crisis. People were taking their money out. It was just a failure of confidence all over the country, orchestrated by certain bankers, according to some people, some historians. They were just expanding and then contracting stuff and then buying up assets when there's a big emergency. Buy low, sell high business. And so there was a lot of turmoil in Kirtland. And then Oliver had a lot of stuff invested with Kirtland and lost pretty much it all. Joseph lost the most. He had the most invested. And then
So rewind a little bit and go back to when Fanny got introduced to the Smith family. What was her role? What was her relationship there in the Smith home?
Well, they had kids, just basically a housekeeper and nanny and cook. And I can imagine there's not fast food or pre-prepared stuff, or not very many restaurants in Kirtland. So you've just got a lot of breakfast, lunch, and dinner to prepare. You've got a lot of people, a lot of guests coming in and visiting, I'm sure. Just a lot of activities.
What year are you looking at? Are we looking at like 1832, 1833 time period?
36.
Oh, we're already 1836.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Don Bradley pegs it at about 1836. And now, if you do know Don Bradley, I've been trying to reach out to him. Maybe we'll have him by the time this gets released or something. But Cheryl Bruno, she's been on here before, and she's good friends with a lot of the historian crowd. And so she's been reaching out, but sometimes people are reluctant to, or they're just busy. But we would like to have more quality guests to have more definitive historical digging going on. But
I'm just gonna ask ChatGPT.
Okay.
So ChatGPT puts it, Fanny Alger. You say it Alger or Alger?
Alger.
Fanny Alger worked as a nanny or house helper for this Joseph Smith family in Kirtland, Ohio, around 1835, 1836, when she was in her late teens. So you're right, 18, 19 would be late teens. Fanny assisted Emma Smith with household duties and became closely associated with the Smith family. This arrangement is significant because it was during this time that her relationship with Joseph Smith reportedly developed, and some sources suggesting it culminated in either a plural marriage or an affair. However, the exact timeline and nature of their relationships remains debated due to the lack of comprehensive documentation from the period. So people are either calling it a plural marriage or they're calling it an affair. What's the deal? Why don't we have information on this? Like, did it get destroyed? Are people hiding something? Like, we have tons of other information from that time period. What's going on?
Well, I wish I knew. It would answer a lot of questions. It's a riddle wrapped in an enigma with a question mark on top. There's a lot of questions that are just not well answered. But as I'm going through these books and websites and podcasts and really trying to understand the flavor of the environment, it was very tumultuous because you've got two big things in life that men get wrapped up in is power, or three things: power, money, and sex. And when you've got potentially all that going on in that time period, it's a lot that could be stirring the waters, so to speak. So it's just, Joseph Smith was still fairly young. I know when I was younger, as you get older, your drive to procreate is not as strong as when you're younger. But I'm not going to accuse him of anything. I'm just trying to understand. And the situation is that I don't know what the circumstances were in which Oliver went to Kirtland, but he had a brother who was also a member of the church, Warren Cowdery. And Warren, apparently, according to this one article in Secret Covenants by Dr. Christopher Smith, he wrote an article, and Don Bradley wrote an article. I have yet to get that book. I do want to get that and read that as well. But there is talk that Joseph Smith not only had to flee Kirtland to far west because of the money trouble, but of the girl business, or people were talking about this, either this or other kinds of things, and whether it was dealing
Do we know
politically
about, like, do we know how Emma Smith felt about Fanny? Do we have any information about, did she get fired? Like, that would like give us, I think, some insight. Like, how did Emma feel towards Fanny?
Well, she got extricated. She got booted after
Fanny.
she found out, or what? Fanny got booted by Emma. After that, I heard it.
We know why.
That Oliver. I heard it said that Oliver came over to intervene, or to help out, or figure out what the deal was, and that's potentially why. But it's just so sketchy, and there's more.
Let me ask
information.
Chat. Here's what Chat GPT says. Emma Smith's reaction to Fanny says Emma Smith reportedly discovered the relationship and was deeply upset. So it sounds like what it was, a plural marriage or an affair. It was being hidden from her.
Oliver Cowdery wrote 2 letters in January 21st of 1838. This is 2 years after 1836.
Okay, so this was right before he got excommunicated.
Yes.
Okay.
And so he wrote a letter to his brother Warren, and he wrote a letter to Joseph Smith on the same day. They're dated the same day. And I have yet to see the full letter. I got a majority of, at least a section of Warren's letter, but just kind of a snippet of Joseph Smith's letter, because they're kind of locked up in archives and things like that. Anyway, they might be on Joseph Smith papers now, but I haven't looked at that. But this is what he writes to Joseph. I learned from Kirtland that you, Joseph, have publicly said that when you were here, I confessed to you that I had willfully lied about you. This compels me to ask you to correct that statement and give me an explanation, until which you and myself are 2. Instead of being 1, they are 2. So they are differing of opinion of what's going on. So there was definitely a rift on what Oliver wrote to Joseph at that time. On the same day, part of the letter that he wrote to his brother is, Oliver was a very, very honor-bound person. Back in the day, you remember when people would have duels, Aaron Burr and Alexander Hammond, the famous duel back then. If you called somebody a liar, you call somebody out and they say, I am not a liar. And, well, let's fix it by a duel, until they made dueling outlawed. But a person's honor meant a lot unless you're a scoundrel and a criminal, where it doesn't matter. But I'll just read you part of this here. It just says, I can assure you, Warren Cowdery and Brother Lyman White, that as God is to judge my soul at the last day, and as I hope for salvation in the world to come, I never confessed, intimated, or admitted that I ever willfully lied about him, Joseph Smith. When I was there, we had some conversation in which every instance I will not fail to affirm that what I had said was strictly true. A dirty, nasty, filthy affair. And the original document had scrape, which also refers to impropriety. Dirty, nasty, filthy affair of his, Joseph, and Fanny Alger's was talked over, in which I strictly declared that I had never deviated from the truth of the matter, and as I am supposed, was admitted by myself. So he was upset and made it known to Warren that Joseph was saying that he was covering for him, he was lying for Joseph, and Oliver saying, no, I had a conversation and I told the truth. So he was trying to defend his honor. And then later that year, that was part of the excommunication of.
So Greg, why did we have such a hard time? Let's just assume that Joseph Smith made a mistake. He had an affair. He sought a revelation on polygamy to justify that affair, to say to himself, no, this was a plural marriage. This was a God thing, not a man thing. Why do we have such a hard time? Like, there's been a massive shift where people are now like, yep, Joseph Smith never practiced any polygamy. He never condoned it. He had nothing to do with it. He fought against it. He never did anything wrong. He basically lived a perfect life. Is it because people's testimonies are like fragile about Joseph Smith that they still can't recognize that maybe he made a mistake, but still believe that he was a prophet? Like, what's going on right now? And there's been kind of a resurgence. I've seen it online where people, they call them polygamy deniers, that Joseph had anything whatsoever to do with polygamy.
Well, of course, you don't want your heroes to have any chinks in their armor or tarnish or garbage. You don't want to hear negative stuff about somebody that you idolize. So that's a natural thing. And it's natural to not want to disclose mistakes, whether it happened or it didn't happen. Something happened that upset Oliver clearly.
And Emma.
And apparently Emma, and there's credible sources that some people will say, well, this witness left the church. But you take the person's overall character and their witnesses about everything along the way. And if there's a pattern of lying, okay, you can discount it. But if there's not a pattern of lying and you have a credible witness, in or out of the church, you can count that and put that as part of the evidence. And another thing about Oliver Cowdery, he had people in and out of the church that testified he was nothing but honest, intelligent, hardworking person. And for Oliver to say this nasty, filthy affair or scrape, nasty, dirty, filthy affair, I mean, that's 4 descriptors, 4 adjectives about something that happened that in his opinion was not good. And from that point on, from Joseph's, the personal letter that he wrote to Joseph, and to Warren, his brother, there was clearly something that he was upset about. And they never got back together. And let me see if I can find the counts, because it was just in, I believe it was April of 1838, or no, maybe it wasn't even that far, that, let's see, but there were, I'm not going to look up the details, take too much time, but there were 9 counts against Oliver Cowdery to have him taken out of the first presidency of, it was basically, there were 2 centers of the church at the time, in Kirtland and in Far West. And Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and W.W. Phelps, I believe, is who made up the 3 presidencies of the Far West Missouri portion.
So it's almost like they sent them down to Far West. So they're like, hey, you guys go manage Far West. And then Joseph and others were up in the Kirtland area.
Yeah, because you had Sidney Rigdon. He had weaseled his way in. And I say weaseled because I don't care for Sidney Rigdon and what he did to the church in Missouri. Because he left with Joseph apparently and Hiram apparently after the Kirtland era. He came out and he plays a pivotal role after the excommunication of Oliver Cowdery. And so there were 9 counts in the excommunication of Oliver Cowdery. And the second one was that Oliver insinuated that Joseph Smith had an affair. Now, where that insinuation came from, was that from the letter to his brother? Was that a letter to Joseph himself? And at first, well, let me go. There were other counts that were accusing him of counterfeiting, theft. There were some promissory notes that somehow got intercepted by some other people, and Oliver hadn't signed off on them, and so there were still valid promissory notes unless Oliver actually had signed off on them. And so they said that he was trying to steal again from those promissory notes, but he had nothing to do with that. Somebody grabbed those papers somehow. And the other thing was counterfeiting, and falling in with thieves. And that is so uncharacteristic of Oliver. And you had Sidney Rigdon and his brother-in-law that were weaseling in for power at that point. And it's just unfortunate. But those counts, it also had Oliver Cowdery. He sold some property in Missouri that was going to collapse to zero if he's run out of town from those counties. And he just says, I am an American. We fought for freedom to be able to sell property and do whatever we want with our lands. And I'm not going to give up my right as an American and be dictated to by some arbitrary leadership, because the fullness of the United Order wasn't being lived at that time. And so he felt free to sell his property however he wanted to. And the counts were just 9 counts. So he wrote a letter at the excommunication that refuted basically the property ownership points. And the points that he wrote in a letter were dropped or dismissed. And the other factor with Oliver Cowdery is that he had been very sick at the time. He had been given a job to be a surveyor out there in Missouri area. And so he had gotten sick, and it took him 6 weeks, reported on one time, and he was not well a lot. And so he got excommunicated. He didn't show up to it, whether it was from sickness or if he felt that the deck was stacked against him and it was just going to be a kangaroo court. And Joseph was there. And it was shocking to me to realize that Joseph was there. and he didn't stand up for his friend through the gospel restoration. He did not stand up for Oliver one bit.
Why do you think that is?
I think he was mad that Oliver didn't. It appears like
For him?
Oliver didn't cover for him.
Yeah.
I
So
don't know.
he's mad. Oliver's not covering for him. So Oliver, like, let's just break this down and say, okay, this is something potentially that happens. Oliver figures out what's going on between Joseph and Fanny, or maybe Emma finds out. I don't know, but he talks to Emma about it. Emma's upset. They remove Fanny. Oliver becomes this kind of mediator. Joseph's like, dude, cover for me. Why are you putting me, like, why are you telling my wife this stuff? Oliver's like, dude, I'm just being honest. It's important that we be honest here. And the word kind of gets out because that's what happens. I mean, anything that's like this juicy is going to get out, whether it's Fanny that it leaked from, like, it gets out. And Joseph, here he is, the prophet of the restoration. And I know that there was this thing that was happening. Have you heard of this? I don't know how much truth there is to it, but lying for the Lord. Have you heard this?
No.
That concept?
Mm-mm.
So there's some concept that they say in the early days of the church that they would lie for the Lord. Like it was okay to lie if you were lying for the Lord. So I don't think Oliver Cowdery is the kind of guy. Like he strikes me as somebody kind of like my dad. That's just like, he's just going to be honest all the time. He's just going to be honest. It is what it is. And he was unwilling to bend on that for the prophet Joseph Smith. Maybe Joseph Smith knew that, so it was easier to get rid of Oliver Cowdery, make Oliver Cowdery look like the bad guy in this instance, paint him as the bad guy, as the crazy guy, and ultimately get rid of him. And that's essentially what they did, because he wasn't willing to bend on whatever happened. Like something happened. This Fanny thing was a big deal. It was one of the driving things that caused Oliver to be removed from the church. And you think about removing a guy like that, that would be like removing today Dallin H. Oaks or Elder Holland. Just being like, yep, we're getting rid of this guy. Yeah, he's not the guy in charge, but he's way up there, and he's like second in command. And he's the one that's had the 1836 experience at Kirtland Temple. He's the one that had the helped translate, the Book of Mormon with Joseph Smith. He was instrumental, I would say, more so than anybody else, from 1829 to 1836 in the church. And so, of course, a guy like Sidney Rigdon, who, for people who don't know, I guess he was a big kind of pastor preacher kind of guy. Could speak really well, knew the Bible really well. And I think Oliver was kind of a threat, as everybody's kind of jockeying for position in this new organization that's being built. And Joseph's kind of scrambling too. He never had a handle on money. Money was always an issue. He was always trying all of these things that weren't working out. And so, like you said, power, money, and sex, that was going on in the early days of the church. And when that goes on, weird stuff happens, bad things happen, relationships fall out. I mean, that's just the reality of mankind in any organization.
So to me, Oliver was an anchor.
Yeah.
He was the first member of the church baptized.
Right.
He was the first priesthood holder. He got baptized, and then he baptized Joseph. He got ordained, then he ordained, or then with the priesthood, from what I understand. They were together. I don't know who got ordained first with Peter, James, and John, Melchizedek priesthood. We don't have a lot of good records about that incident, but they were there together, neck and neck, pulling like two ox, pulling the restoration cart down the road. And then in 1836, they have the Kirtland experience, and they have all the keys of the restoration given at that time, and things were cranking on all pistons at full steam ahead.
Oh, and
then
let's not forget that. Let's not forget that they wrote in the Doctrine and Covenants, the 1835 edition, section 101, like no polygamy, no if or ands or buts about it. This is the deal. Let's also remember that the Book of Mormon is very clear on what polygamy is and what polygamy isn't in Jacob chapter 2. So I'm sure this was the reason it went into section 101 is because my guess is Joseph Smith had this impression, this prompting, this push to do plural marriage. And I think some people say as early as 1832 or whatever, he started having these discussions. And I can imagine Oliver Cowdery's like, okay, dude, like I'm having these like revelatory experiences with you. I hear what you're saying, that you're having this impression or you're receiving this revelation, but I'm not. And so they were two as well, on that. And, you know, like you said, you got raging hormones happening. Go ahead.
Well, you tell me your thoughts on, and I haven't studied the historical context, the time frame, the documentation, or if it's just a fable, but the drawn sword, the angel with drawn sword story, where if Joseph didn't take another wife, then he was going to be destroyed, taken out of place, and another would be put in his stead. Do you have thoughts on that?
I'm gonna pull it up on ChatGPT and see if I can find it. But just because I want to find the time period. So the account of the angel appearing to Joseph Smith with the drawn sword is tied to his introduction and practice of plural marriage. This visitation is reported to have occurred around 1834. Depending on various historical accounts, but it is most commonly dated as 1841 or 1842 in Nauvoo, Illinois. So there's like we just 1834 to 1841, but let's just say that it's 1834. The church is in its infancy. Joseph Smith's pondering. He's reading the scriptures. He's like, well, Abraham appears to have had more than one wife. Huh? Looks like Jacob has appeared to have more than one wife. In 1834, Joseph Smith would have been 29 years old. So think of a 29-year-old good-looking guy where you're the prophet of the restoration. You're having these incredible experiences. You know, your hormones are probably through the roof. And you probably got girls that are just like throwing themselves at you on top of all of that. So you're having all of these thoughts about what's in the Bible. You know that you're involved in a restoration. So you're seeking an answer partially because you're like, it would be really nice to maybe, you know, have a relationship with so-and-so and feel justified. And so let's assume that it is 1834, according to ChatGPT, that an angel comes to him with a drawn sword. Let's just break that down. And let's use our brains for a second. So you're Joseph Smith, you're praying about plural marriage, and an angel comes to him with a drawn sword and commands him to begin practicing polygamy, or else he would kill him. So what do we know about God and agency? He never takes agency away. What do we know about Satan and agency? Satan wanted to take our agency away. So we need to really look at who this angel is. Now, it's one thing for like Jonah to be told to go preach the gospel in Nineveh, and he refuses to do that, and he gets swallowed by the whale, right? It's a whole other thing to say, hey, I want you to, you know, I mean, that's breaking the law at that time. I assume that was not to enter into plural marriage was maybe against the United States Constitution. I don't know what the laws were at that time. I know it's illegal at this time, but I mean, that's a pretty big deal. And so Joseph probably goes to Oliver and like, dude, an angel came to me with a sword, told me I have to do this or he's going to kill me. And I could see Oliver being like, well, no angel came to me. And this just doesn't pass the smell test. But because of maybe where Joseph Smith was, maybe because of the desire of his heart, I don't know, because I don't know Joseph Smith, but maybe it was something that was appealing to him. And so he wanted to push for this. Oliver pushed back on it. And in 1835, they write out, no, there's no plural marriage. And it's like, okay. And because Joseph Smith agrees that there's no plural marriage and he refuses it at that time, they have the 1836 experience. The Lord goes, okay, cool. You passed this test. Good. Gotcha. They have the 1836 experience. And then after that, we see this continued idea of, I really think we need to practice this plural marriage. And I've contemplated this a lot. Does God test man? And I think of the temple, and Satan goes, I've just been doing what we've done in other worlds. So clearly there are times where God tests man, and then there are other times where Satan tests man. So I don't know if this was a God test or if this was Satan trying to get Joseph to partake of the apple. I don't know, but I think it was certainly a test for Joseph Smith to see if he could pass this test. You know, and that may have been the case, but certainly Joseph and Oliver didn't agree. But when we look and we hear about this angel with the drawn sword, we have to really pause and say, like, angels and God does not take away. If you say, no, I'm not going to do that, God doesn't then say, okay, you're dead. And if God did say, okay, you're dead, I would say that you passed the test. Like you used your agency, you made your own decision. And furthermore, Emma wasn't cool with this. She never liked the concept and the idea. It was never a good thing for their marriage. And so how can you break your first love's heart like that, right? So you gotta think about that as well, and the strain that it was on Joseph's relationship. So not only did he, not become one with Oliver Cowdery, I would say that he and Emma's relationship was probably, we know it was strained with the Fanny situation. But this drawn sword thing has always caused me to just, pause a little bit. I'll read a little bit here. Context of the event: Joseph Smith reportedly hesitated to fully implement the principle of plural marriage, fearing backlash and its implications. According to some accounts, an angel appeared to Joseph with a drawn sword, commanding him to obey the divine directive to establish plural marriage. The angel reportedly warned him that failing to comply would lead to consequences for himself and his role as a prophet.
So a thought came to me about testing the spirits or testing angels. It's in the Doctrine and Covenants. You try to shake the hand of whatever, but how do you test an angel with a drawn sword?
Yeah, I mean,
What was that?
Well, I think one of the main tests is the context of what the angel is, the information the angel is giving to you. So that's one test, and I don't even think at this time that testing of angels. I think it's section 110. I'm not sure. Maybe not. I don't know, but maybe it's 129. I can't remember. But that revelation didn't take place um, till like 1842 or 1843. So it could have been, and maybe you can find it, MacGyve, but if this was taking place in 1834, Joseph Smith didn't know how to test a good angel from a bad angel until he received that revelation. Uh, 18, it's section 129. So it's February 9th, 1843 is when he actually gets that revelation, which on any account, he and listen, just using deductive reasoning, maybe he realized, oh crap, I got duped. How do I know if it's a good angel or a bad angel? So he goes and asks the Lord, and the Lord gives him section 129. And he's like, well, that would have been nice to know when this angel told me to do this. But by that time, by 1843, like they were knee deep in this polygamy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
Going back to the excommunication of Oliver, well, it certainly, just the more and more I look into the founding principles of the gospel of Jesus Christ, polygamy was only supposed to be done very rarely. In the case in Jacob 2, 1819, talks about how in rare case, I suppose if you have, I'm sorry.
Not 1819. It was like in the 20s.
Jacob 2.
It's Jacob 2, 20 through 26 or something like that.
Okay.
1819 is about me every month.
Population where the. Oh, okay, gotcha. So if you've got a population where there is not enough men to go around, was that even an issue back in that day?
No, that wasn't.
That would go around. So that wasn't an issue.
No, it wasn't an issue.
And the issue was, because the Levirate polygamy, where a brother has to take the wife of a deceased brother to give him seed, so that in the eternal worlds he has posterity, and that doesn't happen that often. So the whole situation of the foundational reasoning for having it didn't seem to exist.
Yeah.
For any rationale to pull the trigger on doing it. Now the podcast that was done recently on Gospel Tangent, that's the name of it, by Dr. Christopher Smith, who is not a member, but he stated that it seems to be, when he was doing the editing for Don Bradley on this book, Secret Covenants, all about polygamy, there was a bunch of articles compiled together to make a nice book. The thought and the language he stated to Don Bradley says this could actually be a spiritual sealing, so that Fanny got sealed to Joseph as a part of the family.
So I've heard that, and I would love to talk to somebody, because then I would say, okay, if that's the case, why did Emma fire her, get rid of her? What is dirty, filthy, and nasty? Like, if that's the case, then why do we have all this other stuff?
They're not saying that. Yeah, they're not saying that didn't exist. They're saying that it could have morphed into a dirty, nasty, filthy thing after a sealing, and so there's different nuances and aspects that could have existed where she was just adopted into the family, and then some impropriety took place where Emma saw some things and was upset. And
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing. So Jacob 2 verse 30 says, "For if I will, saith the Lord of hosts, raise up seed unto me, I will command my people, otherwise they shall hearken unto these things." So this is talking about polygamy. So here's the interesting thing to me is this. Let's assume Joseph Smith did practice polygamy, and we know the Lord in the Book of Mormon says it is to raise up seed. Well, Joseph Smith did a really bad job. If he was commanded to practice polygamy in order to raise up seed, he did a really bad job there, and that goes into favor for these polygamy deniers that they're just like, well, where are the children? Like, where are the kids that he should have had if he was practicing polygamy? You know what I mean? And it's a really good point. I mean, I see that argument because clearly he didn't have any kids. So he was doing, if he was commanded to practice polygamy, and this says to raise up seed. It's not like, hey, according to just the Book of Mormon, like it is to raise up seed. It's not to, like, you can go ahead and take care of somebody. Like, you could, let's say that you got a widow and she needs help being taken care of. Like, you can do that without having sex with her. Like, there's a lot of things you could do to take care of that person without having a sexual relationship with that person. You know what I mean? So we have this idea, well, it's because they needed somebody to take care of them. There weren't enough men. Like, we go through this rationale of things that when you really break it down, it's kind of like almost irrational. And I've said this before. I'm like, and I'll ask you, Greg, there's been so many people that have fallen away from the church because of this polygamy issue. I don't know how many people have chosen not to join the church because of the historical polygamy issue. I wonder, and we know that the prophet in 1890 had a vision that basically showed the utter destruction of the church if they continued to practice polygamy. So that's interesting. Like, why would God command them to do something that would lead to their destruction? That sounds like what Satan does, not what God does. So these are logical things but because we get so wrapped up in the justification process and the rationale process, it's like we take all of the red flags that are like bing, bing, and we just we don't want to look at those things or acknowledge them because it would hurt our justification or our rationale. But how big would the church have been if polygamy was never a thing, right? Like, how big would it have been if it was never introduced? Would Joseph Smith have lived longer? Like, there's lots of questions.
How big would it have gotten, potentially at least, if they wouldn't have booted Oliver and David Whitmer? Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and W. House. What happened after he was Oliver insinuated that Joseph had committed adultery according to one of the points in the excommunication charges, of which he did not refute. He refuted, yes, I sold my property because of this, and this, and it's my right as an American citizen to be able to do that. And they dismissed everything that he refuted, but he did not refute that he insinuated that Joseph had committed adultery. So and that's no small matter.
Right.
That's no small point of being excommunicated. And so, what a stressful time for Joseph and Oliver. And Joseph was in that court, and Joseph said nothing. He said, listen, Oliver is my bosom buddy. We did the Book of Mormon. We got the priesthood. We restored the church. He was the first speaker after the church was organized on that following Sunday. just so many things we've gone through. We're not going to railroad him on out of town. But he said not a thing to prevent that from happening. So Oliver and the others were removed. And what was interesting, 2 months later, I believe he was excommunicated in April. Yeah, it was April. And then in June or thereabouts, Sidney Rigdon, who had ascended to a bit of power there to fill the vacuum, he delivered the famous Salt Sermon. Do you recall anything about the Salt Sermon?
No.
Okay, the Salt Sermon, you recall in the New Testament how it says, if a man if salt loses its savor, is good for nothing but to be trod under the foot of men.
Right.
Okay, so Sidney Rigdon preached against the people who were still in far west Missouri, but had been kicked out of the church. And he basically said that these people are good for nothing but to be trod under the foot of men. And then 2 days after he delivered that Salt Sermon, 83 people had signed a document called the Danite Manifesto that said, get out of town. You got basically 72 hours, you defectors from the truth, to get out of town, or fatal consequences may come upon your heads, or words to that effect. And when I learned about that, I said, what are you talking about? Talk about ministering to the people who have been excommunicated. What kind of ministering is that?
Yeah.
Do you throw
persecution?
Yeah. And then you've heard of the Danites. That was the beginning of the Danites' rage and reign in Missouri, because shortly after that, the Mormon War in Missouri came about. And isn't that literally a war?
Isn't that timing interesting? So I would love to do a comparison of all sections of the D&C and see how many of them, like what percentage of them were written prior to 1838 and what percentage were written after 1838, and just do kind of a comparison to see if Revelation slowed down some, because it sure feels like to me that time period from 1838 to 1844 was filled with persecution. It was filled with getting moved out of their place. Obviously, it was filled with imprisonment of Joseph Smith. We have the Liberty Jail.
Yeah.
So it's like the Lord, and to say that, oh, they're just being persecuted. Maybe the Lord is chastising them. Maybe the Lord is saying, I am not well pleased. Maybe the Lord is frustrated with what is going on, and so they're being chastised. And sometimes we think persecution is like, oh, we're the victim here. Maybe the Lord's like, no, you guys have done some things that I am not well pleased with, right? And I would say that dude, Oliver Cowdery, you don't hear anything where he did anything wrong. Like, you don't hear this guy making up lies. You don't hear him doing nefarious things. You don't hear him going. He just seems like a pretty stand-up dude. He was a school teacher that became a lawyer, I believe, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's a real shame that he, like when Joseph lost that anchor, and what does an anchor do but keep the ship from, being thrown around everywhere? When that anchor was gone, it just feels like that ship just started really like wobbling.
Oh, absolutely. And it must have been heartbreaking to Oliver.
Totally. Can you imagine?
He did move. And I read that when that Danite Manifesto was given, they quickly, David Whitmer, which is Oliver's brother-in-law, Oliver married Elizabeth, David's sister. And so they were close family relations as well as first witnesses of the Book of Mormon, or the golden plates. They quickly went to get some legal advice about being kicked out. But while they went to another county to get some advice on what to do, if they could write some kind of stoppage order, their families were kicked out of the house, the wives and children, and their belongings strewn about in the street. Are you kidding me? And I'm getting upset as I'm reading about these things happening to the second elder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And my heart goes out to him. And when he moved to Tifton, Ohio, and he had a law practice, and he was doing well enough, even though he had the baggage of being a Mormon, and it was used against him all the time, either in business or he actually ran. He was nominated. He didn't even run, but he was nominated for certain offices. He was close to being victorious, except they used his Mormon affiliation against him, and he lost the vote. But all the way along, his business partner, especially in 1844 when Joseph was killed, but he said Oliver had this sense of sadness about him.
Don't you find it interesting? Don't you find it interesting, Greg, that of all the other people that were in leadership, the Sidney Rigdons, the James String, all of these people, when they left the church, they went and started their own thing. When Oliver got excommunicated with these guys, he didn't try and start something new and start something to compete. He just said, okay, I'm going to go live my life and try to figure it out. And I think that's interesting because Oliver Cowdery could have easily made the case like, I got keys too. I was there too. I was there when they gave me these keys. I was there when they gave me this priesthood. I was there. Sorry, this alarm keeps going off. I don't know how to shut this thing off.
Power it down.
I got my my son stayed the night over here, so he's been asleep on the couch. He's been getting a history lesson on Oliver Cowdery, but anyways, I find it interesting that Oliver Cowdery didn't go out and try and start something.
The interesting thing about that too is that in his letters to his other brother-in-law, Phineas Young, the brother of Brigham Young, he felt that he did have keys still, because he felt that he was unjustly removed. And for a period of time, until he learned later on that Section 124 of the Doctrine and Covenants documents how he was removed, and then Hiram Smith was put in his place as the second president. And so, but for a while there, he was just one.
What's interesting too, I just turned to Section 124. Guess who else gets introduced around that same time? The infamous John C. Bennett.
Oh, John C. Bennett. Mm.
Yeah, we know he turned out to be a bad guy. No.
Yeah. But all the way along, Oliver was writing letters to Phineas Young, and he was just saying that he wanted his honor restored. And basically, he wanted the fact that he was kicked out of the church for being a cheat and a liar and a thief in the counts of the document of excommunication. And he wanted that restored. He didn't want to come back into the church until that was fixed, so that his honor, when he testifies of the validity of the Book of Mormon, that he is a credible witness, that his honor is not tarnished. And so when Joseph was murdered in 1844. So you had 6 years from 1838 to 1844 where there was no reconciliation between Oliver and Joseph. That girl business, quote unquote, was referred to and documented. That's all it talked about. It was girl business in the notes of the excommunication. That was the rift. That was what kept them apart. That was never resolved. And then in 1844, I believe it was April, we had Cheryl Bruno on as a guest, the other historian, and she wrote a book about William Marks and how William Marks, who was also run out because he was not a polygamist. He did not want to. He was the Nauvoo stake president, and that was a powerful position. Emma actually liked William Marks. And
Emma wanted him to be the one that
William Marks
to kind of take things over after Joseph Smith's death, right?
That's what it seems. But Oliver also one thing about Oliver is that David Whitmer and Martin Harris, they were commissioned by the Lord through revelation of Joseph Smith to choose the 12 apostles, to select the 12 apostles. And so they knew that there was power in the 12. And so Oliver felt and he joined with the 12 when he did come back to the church. He didn't go to the Strangites. He didn't go to David Whitmer. He didn't go to Sidney Rigdon. He didn't go to any offshoots. He went to the body of the 12 and the body of the saints.
And it's interesting that he didn't go where Emma Smith was. Like he went to where the body of the saints were, and I've often had this thought, because he just seems like a guy that seeks revelation. Like, of all the places Oliver could have gone, where does he go but to where Brigham Young and the larger body of the saints were? That's where he ended up. And that to me kind of tells me a little bit about, like, maybe where the Lord told Oliver Cowdery to go. Why did Oliver Cowdery go there? And I'd love to dig in. And I hope that we do air this episode, because I really think that there is so much more going on with Oliver Cowdery, with this history. You had mentioned that you knew about these 9 boxes. Can you tell me a little bit more about these 9 boxes or these records?
Can we save that for the end? Can we save that for the end? Because I want to talk a little bit about William Marks.
Yeah.
Okay. William Marks, in April of 1844, shortly before Joseph and Hiram were martyred, he talked to Joseph on the streets of Nauvoo, and he told several people that Joseph told him that polygamy was a mistake, that he was deceived. And that was talked about in the previous episode with Cheryl Bruno. And he said, I'm going to work to correct that wrong. And there are several talks and writings about anti-polygamy by Joseph and Hiram. So they apparently
reverse course.
Yeah. And they taught against it. And at the time, the 12, they were out campaigning. They were on a mission, doing missionary work and campaigning for Joseph Smith's presidency in various different places, and either on a mission in other locations. I don't know where all the 12 were, but they were not in Nauvoo at the time, and that Joseph got murdered. And can you imagine having that doctrine being talked about that you're already practicing? Joseph saying, no, it's wrong, but he didn't get to personally witness and say, this is not the right thing. And so you're already indoctrinated into doing polygamy. And then when you come home, what are you going to do? Well, Joseph is dead. You can't talk to him. And so the polygamy continues to roll forward. And
Well, and if Satan knew that polygamy would destroy the restored church, and if Satan saw that Joseph was changing his tune, it would make sense that then Satan would be like, I got to get rid of him. I got to inspire people to kill him. I need to do something. I got to get rid of this guy. Because if I can keep this polygamy train going, then I can destroy this restoration and this church will fall apart and it will be destroyed and I can continue to reign here upon the earth.
Yeah. And why do you think they didn't stop it if Joseph had preached against it at the last part of his life? Well, it's not like they've got an iPhone or they've got an Android to look up articles that are published or things, recordings. There's no, things are not well distributed back in the day, and especially when there's turmoil. What are we going to do in a panic of succession and the whole ball of wax? Imagine just having, now you don't have Oliver, now you don't have Joseph, and so you're a ship without a total anchor or sail almost there for a little while, being tossed about. But you've got the 12. The structure of the church was in the 12. And had 70s been called yet? I don't even know if 70s had been called at that.
I don't know.
But the fullness of the structure of the church, it was the organization of the church was there with the 12, and that's what Oliver felt.
And so then you have a guy that's William Marks, who's outside of the 12, who wasn't out on the mission, but was a close association with Joseph Smith. And he's getting downloads from Joseph Smith, like, this is what needs to be. But the 12's like, we didn't hear that from Joseph Smith because they didn't have the iPhones. And I'm sure Joseph Smith would have sent a group text out to all of the 12, like, hey guys, just got an update here. But so when they came home and you get this William Marks is like trying to tell them, they're just like, no, dude, trust me. I sat in lots of meetings and they'd already wrapped their minds around this concept and idea. Many of them probably found it to be like, oh, this is like, I like this program. This is kind of a cool program. I get, whatever variety or whatever it is that the natural man may like to feel justified in. And so for a lot of them, I think it was almost an appealing doctrine. And so that, and they wanted to move forward with it. They'd already like convinced themselves of the truthfulness of it. They've justified themselves of it through the Old Testament and felt like it was the right thing to do. So you get a guy like William Marks that doesn't hold the same kind of weight as the 12. And, he ends up getting, going a different, I think, did he end up following with Emma Smith to the reorganize?
Yes. And she was good, or she was very good friends with him. He helped prepare the body of Joseph and Hiram after they were killed. I mean, that's how close of association they were. There was a dispute about property and different things like that he was trying to help her with, because he wanted to look after her, make sure that this widow is well taken care of. And so he was just introduced into the situation. He did join with the reorganized church eventually, not at first, but he was run out of town. So he was accused of various different things, and he says, no, I'm loyal to the 12. I'm loyal to the 12. Sidney Rigdon was trying to raise his own head and put himself in charge. And Sidney had written that, William Marks is on my side. And then William Marks tries to defend himself and said, no, I'm not on the side of Sidney. So it was just a big old nasty mess. But loyalists to Brigham actually did the same kind of thing to William Marks. They just made it very uncomfortable for him to be in Nauvoo and saw that he left town. Just probably some of those Danite people taking things into their own hands again. Not a real good situation. And people taking power into their own hands has always not really worked out well for the church.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Okay, so tell me a little bit about kind of the research you've been doing as you've been kind of digging in, and I would say that we don't have a definitive position on any of it. It's like we are in discovery mode, we're in research mode, we're talking to lots of different, and it's interesting that even researchers can't agree on what actually happened here. And you get different researchers saying different things, and these are professional researchers, so there's something that just isn't adding up and definitive, and is creating this kind of like, I don't know, a difference of opinion. Is it lack of information, lack of documentation?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But the thing is that Oliver really, really got dumped on. He got kicked out. He got dumped on, and he wasn't restored in a timely manner for 6 years was reaching, before Joseph was murdered. He was reaching out, trying to say, "Hey, I want my honor restored. Let's talk." There was no communications whatsoever with Joseph. And even after Joseph was murdered, yet Brigham Young not responding. I have in the notes, what did Brigham say about this? What did Brigham say about that? And what is Brigham's response? And there was no response for a long time. Yeah, you can say it's, oh, we're busy and there's a lot of things. There are a lot of things happen. They're getting kicked out of Nauvoo here pretty soon. But he just, the response was very, very lacking, especially when your brother, Phineas, delivers papers and letters to Brigham, and the response is crickets. I think that Brigham is sensitive to a threat of power. Do you think that might have been the case?
Yeah, totally. What do you
And
think?
so I do. William Marks was a threat to power. Of course, he, rightly so, Brigham is defending the church organization, the 12 apostles. But as I'm reading these documents, as I'm trying to figure out and make sense out of all of this craziness, there was a book referred to by Scott Follering and Richard Anderson. They were collaborating with the documentary history of Oliver Cowdery, and I said, "What is this?" And so I wrote to this place. I called this place, and I finally called the church archivist. There's a guy named Jeffrey at the church historian's office, and he helped locate these 9 boxes right there close to where you live. How far is the University of Utah from where you live?
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Close.
Okay. So there are these 9 boxes that they have, and I don't know yet. I'm still working with a librarian to see what the copyright is on all this. But there was supposed to be a work all about Oliver Cowdery released, but it never did get released. And there's drafts. I don't know how many papers, but there's 9 boxes of material related directly to Oliver Cowdery, just sitting in there like the Ark of the Covenant in Indiana Jones warehouse at the very end, where these boxes are just going into a big warehouse at a library, and they've just been sitting there. I don't know of anybody that's done anything with it, but I'm asking this librarian to check on the copyright to see what the copyright rule is. Does the church own all these papers? Does the widow, does the estate of this historian own all these papers? Are they copyrighted at all, or are they open source? So I'm in the middle of getting feedback on what the status is of that.
I have this feeling that we're entering into it is the age of Aquarius, and part of Aquarius is transparency and truth unveiling itself. So maybe there's something to all this. And maybe the reason why this discussion is coming up again and bubbling up again is because there's some truth. And I hope that we have strong testimonies. Like, the Book of Mormon's true, and because of that, Joseph Smith's a prophet of God. And if something gets brought to light that shows that Joseph Smith made a mistake somehow, we should be able to go like, oh, dude, yeah, he had to access the atonement too. He's just like us. And to me, I like the idea that anybody can mess up. Like, look at King David. Here he had everything, and he ends up committing adultery with Bathsheba and killing Uriah. Yet we don't all of a sudden discount David. We still refer to him as King David. We still praise him. We still read Psalms. Like, there's all sorts of things. We don't think just now all of a sudden, oh, David is this piece of crap and he's worthless and disregard that guy. He made a mistake. He needed the atonement just like all of us.
And also, when you look at the lineage of Christ, didn't Christ come through Bathsheba?
Yeah, 100%. So Christ's lineage traces back to an adulterous affair. So, I mean, come on, let's just think through things before we jump to conclusions. And if a prophet messes up, they're human. They're mortal men trying their best to do God's work. And it's the reality of this situation of mortality that we're in.
And I like what you say all the time, and it's indicated in scriptures and talks and other things like that. Even President Nelson talks about it, but not trusting in the arm of flesh, but taking everything to the Lord and having confirmation of the Holy Ghost. Determine what is true and what counsel with the Lord in all thy doings. And not only counsel with the Lord, but even the Lord himself, I'm sure, would sanction having confirmation of the Holy Ghost.
Every time I hear this phrase, I hear this song in my head. It goes like this. I don't know if you know this song, and I don't know where it comes from. It goes, I trust in the Lord with all my heart. I will not lean upon my own understanding. Do you know that song?
No, I don't.
But every time I hear that, it's like that song comes into my head. I trust in the Lord with all my heart. And when we say the arm of flesh, it's also our own arm. Like we can't rely on our own arm of flesh or anybody else's. We've got to trust the Lord with everything. We got to take everything to the Lord. So even though we may have what we think is a revelation, or we may have what we think is this brilliant thought, we got to go and check in with the Holy Ghost and make sure that that's legit. Okay, we're running up on time here. We are living in an interesting time where, I mean, I don't know, Greg, did you see that archaeological discovery in a prison in Israel where they found that Jesus is God? Like, there's all this inscription and all this stuff that is like, yeah, I'll send it to you. But there's some stuff that is coming out. It's coming to light. And I think we're going to get more and more clarity as to what the truth actually is. And we're getting closer and closer and closer to that day where this second coming that we've been talking about for 2,000 years actually happens. So
I know that there's a lot of records over in Asia that have been hidden for a long time. And who knows how many places around the world have stuff that might be breaking out.
Totally. Well, Gregory, have a great day at church. Thanks for having this discussion here about Oliver Cowdery. And we covered, a lot of things like surface level, but there's a lot of things that we got to really dig into and try and figure it out. And listen, if just understand we're in the research phase on all of this stuff. We haven't come to a determination on any of it for a fact that this is. We're just in that studying it out in our minds. These are the discussions that McGive and I have. Just like, hey, could this be? And he's in there digging in, doing research, because ultimately we just want to know, because there's so much stuff out there, from Joseph Smith never practiced polygamy to Joseph Smith had 40 something wives to, and everything in between. We're just trying to figure out what is the truth, what really happened, and what does at least the evidence tell us as we research things. And then it's on us to, if you care about this stuff, to take it to the Lord and try and figure it out through the power of the Holy Ghost. So, Greg, thanks for coming on to another episode of the Radical Restoration. It's been a minute since we've recorded one of these episodes. Love having these conversations. I think Oliver Cowdery is, like I said, one of those great unsung heroes of the Restoration. I'm going to jump on this call and figure out what kind of plates have been discovered, these Buddhist plates, and see what that's all about. But listen, if you watch this video and you like it, well, smash that like button, share it, post in the comments, give us what you guys think. Let's get a group mind together to try and figure this out. And I think if we all kind of come together with all the research, we can get some clarity on all of this stuff. For myself, I'm Shane Baldwin. For the real MacGyver, Gregory MacGyver, thank you all for tuning in, and hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you guys all next time.
Come together, searching for the way, guided by the Spirit, shining every day. Voices call from Zion, beckoning the pure, gathering the faithful where the truth is sure. Follow the Spirit, follow the light, follow the truth. Don't lose your way, don't lose your way. Follow the Spirit, follow the light, follow the light, follow the truth. It shines today. Gather all the nations, call them to the fold, where Zion's truth and glory brighter than the gold. Seeking for the answers for what we never knew, finding in the Spirit all things pure and true. Follow the Spirit, follow the light, follow the truth. Don't lose your way, don't lose your Spirit. Follow the light, follow the truth. It shines today. Follow the truth. Don't lose your way, don't lose your way. Don't lose the truth. Don't lose your way. It shines today. Gather all the nations, call them to the fold, with Zion's truth and glory brighter than the gold. Seeking for the answers for what we never knew, finding in the Spirit